Hello, my name is Fischer. I'm working for the Natural Resources Institute Finland, called LUCA, and I'm happy to talk today about my previous experiences with a workflow manager called Snakemake. The talk is grammatically called From Snakemake to Nextflow, but of course it is impossible to make such a transition within 6 minutes plus 4 minutes discussion. Instead, what I would like to use this time for is to give you some perspective to another workflow manager. Snakemake was released in 2012 by Johannes Köster, and like Nextflow, also Snakemake received lately lots of attention, as people tend to realize that composing their analysis with a collection of bash scripts is not the most effective way to perform data analysis. I haven't checked the citation numbers, but I would assume they are somewhat equal between Nextflow and Snakemake, with roughly 900 citations. Both workflow managers have an active community of users. For example, there are over 150 contributors to the Snakemake GitHub repository. When I started to use workflow managers a few years ago, my choice fell on Snakemake, honestly, just because of my impatience. I have that with many new tools, apps, and web pages. It's not the nicest character move, but maybe some of you have the same issue. When I do not get within a reasonable amount of time nice results or feedback, I fastly lose my interest and move on to an equally good alternative. Back then in 2012, I tried both Nextflow and Snakemake. And during that time, Snakemake's learning curve was steeper and the frustration curve flatter, so I just started to use Snakemake. For me, the main contributing factor for the different slopes of the learning and frustration curves were the different philosophies on how the data flow is defined and organized. Whereas Snakemake uses plain file names with wildcards that are intuitively to use, even with little to none experience, Nextflow's channels were confusing for me in the beginning, though advanced users certainly get more flexibility with that approach. There's a huge design difference how the dependency graph of the different jobs is constructed. Whereas Nextflow creates, to the best of my knowledge, the dependency graph and execution direction of the rules, Snakemake needs to build it up from bottom to top, resulting in performance issues in the past. Otherwise, for regular users, both systems support the most common container management systems, as well as seamless cluster and cloud support. Next, I would like you to show a truncated workflow example. Typically, one would start with defining the sample names, here just hard-coded A, B, and C. The following rules sorts then the BAMP files within the workflow. Each rule in Snakemake is constructed by defining the input, the output, and what should be done. In addition, lots of optional sections can be added. Here I added still conda. This conda section points to a file that automatically downloads and installs the required software into a conda environment. The real difference is then in the definition of the input and the output. You can see in the input section we refer to BAMP files located in a folder called mapped, and we are using the wildcard sample in curly brackets that is then expanded to all three elements from the sample list. That means the rule is applied to the three input files mapped A BAM, mapped B BAM, and mapped C BAM. And any further wildcard sample is then during runtime substituted with the correct sample A, B, or C. That means the rule creates for each sample element in the sorted BAM output files also into the mapped folder. Finally, the functionality is written in the shell part. Here one enters the command that should be applied using our input-output files, just using the corresponding references in curly brackets. Snakemake offers also a large library of already written rules called wrapper. Wrapper only require the input and the output files, as well as some optional parameters, as well as the name of the wrapper. And then the magic happens under the hood. If I understood it right, a similar concept was also recently added to Nextflow. As said before, I only want to present a perspective to another workflow manager. So I also want to use some of the time to highlight the disadvantages of Snakemake. I think the biggest issue is that it is almost 10 years old, and as such, its concepts are probably not anymore top-notch in software development, and experienced programmers might see some design flaws inside it. The other big issue is the time it needs to build a DAG. For example, for my GBS pipeline with roughly 20,000 jobs, it takes Snakemake about 3 hours to prepare the DAG, whereas smaller workflows start in seconds or minutes. However, since Snakemake version 5.27, the release team claims that they have tremendously improved the DAG construction time so that a workflow with 100,000 jobs starts also in less than a minute. But that is something I haven't tested yet. From users' perspective, I think that Nextflow has way more to offer for experienced users. I was under the impression that the provided workflows, especially within NF Core, cover a very broad range from basic analysis to very, very specialized ones. In essence, I think Snakemake was not able in the past to attract that number of specialists who are able to code highly specialized workflows. I shortly told you about my workflow manager experiences, and now I'm here to make the transition to Nextflow, as I hope that having good teachers actually flattens the frustration curve a lot. And in essence, back then that slope was the only decision criteria to choose Snakemake. While Snakemake is, in my opinion, more beginner-friendly, it has its flaws that I hope to be able to overcome after this workshop. So my personal conclusion is that Nextflow seems to aim also for very advanced users and provides them with unmatched flexibility, but that flexibility comes with the price of a flatter learning curve for beginners. So with that, I would like to thank you, and I'm open for discussion.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This was extremely informative and very interesting. And just a side comment before taking questions for all our Bovrec colleagues. I want to make it clear that we maintain Nextflow. We will help anyone wishing to use Nextflow, but we understand that resources are limited, and we understand that people have to use what they have, including Snakemake and all of these things. And as Daniel made a very good point, a lot of things can be achieved, a lot of similar things can be achieved with all these tools. So do I have any question for Daniel? I'm looking here. So any Snakemake user? So
maybe I can make a question.
Jose, please go ahead.
Yeah, so how is, because I know that there is this kind of repository of really curated Snakemake pipelines, and in the site of Nextflow we have this NF Core. Have you, so how is this? So it's the community that is behind this repository so active as NF Core, or it's not? So it's a nice question. I really have not deep inside a lot. I know more NF Core, and I wanted to know a little bit what is your take, or how do you feel about it?
So I don't think so that the workflow community is that active in Snakemake like it is like in NF Core or Nextflow. But honestly, I don't really have that much experience. I code the workflows from the scratch, and I don't use ready-made ones. So I don't have so much experience with that neither. But I was under the impression that the workflows are not as well curated as it is in NF Core. And I think also the standards what you have in Nextflow, like this versioning and unit tests and such things, they are not existing there. So as I said, I think Snakemake is maybe more for the basic fast use, and Nextflow is then the next step, so to say, the Workflow Manager 2.0.
If I can comment on this, it's an interesting take, because historically Nextflow was really for us. We had no big ambition for Nextflow, and the story was this is a tiny lab. We've never been more than 10 people, so we really needed. We had plenty of pipelines, and we needed something that would not require rewriting anything. And that's really what was in our mind. And so Paolo single-handedly invented this wrapping language where you could take anything you had and you could simply wrap it, and that's it. It was running, it was deployable. And I want to insist to everyone, of course, there is a proper way of building a pipeline, and that's what you're learning with Jose. And you're cutting your processes in small bits that go here and there, and you make sure they connect. But there is a very ugly way of running Nextflow, which I use all the time, which is you just take your big chunk and you just plug it into Nextflow and you just forget about it. It's not a nice deployment, it's not a nice parallelization, but it does a handle and it becomes a brick that you can forget about because it is containerized and all this kind of thing. So there are really two sides of Nextflow. One which is a nitty-picky thing, and another one which is just boom, you put it in your container, and Nextflow is a very nice way of handling it. And one of the things we had long discussions at the time, because Snakemake was kind of we started Nextflow a little bit before Snakemake, and if Snakemake had existed, I don't know if we would have done Nextflow, but we needed something, and we thought of going Makefile because Snakemake is really going Makefile. But with all the dependency and all that stuff, it was very clear that the DAG, this big graph, was going to kill us. And that's why we decided to go exactly the other way around. And so it's interesting that these two things, are still around and are kind of competing for the same niche, but they really are based on entirely opposite philosophy. And so, do we have any more question or anything else to discuss on this? Does anyone want to make a point? Is there any diehard Snakemake user in our crowd? You can, and no, your computer will not explode. We will not send viruses onto your Zoom or anything. But I'm just curious to know: is there anybody who is very keen on Snakemake, or do they want to make another point for Snakemake?
I just have one question. So by far, what I have never used.
Sorry, who is talking? Who is talking?
Sorry, my name is Minu.
Because for some reason, okay, I'm just trying to go ahead. Keep going.
So my question is that I haven't used Nextflow by far. So in the first hour session, what we learned. So this is based on the Groovy language, as it was mentioned. And where is the Snakemake based on Python? So if you know the Python, it would be very easy to as like a steeper process for learning. Whereas for the Nextflow, you need to learn at least the Groovy programming language to be more advanced in the Nextflow. Do you agree with that or not?
To some extent, because the way I use Nextflow, I don't know Groovy, to be honest, and so there is the way Nextflow is implemented, and there is a way you deploy it, and I don't think the requirement of knowing Groovy is that important. Now, Python is kind of taken for granted, so it's. I agree with you that the fact that Snakemake is implemented in a language familiar to everyone is certainly easy. But I will not say that Groovy is a major obstacle. I think you can, at the end of the day, the internal writing of your pipeline is really your decision. So the place where complex things are taking place, which is really in the core of your pipeline, is something that is really under your entire control, whether you want it to be written in Python, even in Perl for the old guys like me, or all these kind of things. So so that's my. But yes, certainly, if you want to go very deep into hardcore details of the language, it may help. I think time is passing, so we're gonna have to move to the next talk, and so the next talk will be. So I have to warn those of